Good evening. It's 6 p.m. on March 30th, 2022. This is a meeting of the Bylaws Committee, subcommittee, I guess, of the Prudential Committee. I'll just quickly take attendance. This is Mark Lynch, Rick Pisano, Amy Cates,
Here.
Carol Zace,
Present.
Mark Robinson.
Here.
Great. I've sent out the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Unless anyone has comments or additions, deletions, I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
Seconded?
I'll second Amy. Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The meeting minutes from February 15th meeting are approved. I thought I'd try to start with the what I hope is the easiest, least controversial stuff. So Lisa, thank you for going through and getting the typographical changes, grammatical changes, the form. It certainly looks a lot better than it used to. I do note one additional typo in Article 11, Section 1. The third line, 10 monthly meetings, we're missing an S on meeting. Lisa, you're muted.
Say it again, Mark.
It's Article 11, Section 1, third line. Should be 10 monthly meetings, plural.
Oh, meetings. Okay, great. Yeah.
Lisa, if I can just ask you to make that change to your changes.
Can you repeat where you were? I was trying to share my screen.
Yes, it's Article 11, Section 1, line 3. "10 monthly meetings."
Section
1, line 3.
Oh, good one. All righty.
Okay.
Good catch.
So I think the way to do this is Lisa also made what I think is potentially, or arguably at least, a substantive change between insurer and ensure. So I think we should handle that in a separate motion. But if everyone has had a chance to review Lisa's corrections and is okay with them, I would ask for a motion that these changes be accepted, and we use this document with the track changes as the basis for our further changes.
So moved.
Can I ask?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And you're just, Mark, it's Amy, you're just talking about any spelling changes, typos. That's what you're asking us to assert to, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Everyone got a copy of Lisa's track changes with,
Right.
you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So can I ask just for clarification, are you saying you would like me to create this document by accepting all of those track changes except for the issue of ensure?
I think, yes, we can do that.
Because it's just format. Okay.
Yes, format and grammatical and typos. And then going forward, the next one is Article 5, Section 1.
Article 5, Section 1.
And
Yep.
in the first line, you pointed out that the word insure, INSURE, should really properly be ensure.
Yes, we do not pay insurance premiums to ensure something happens. We aim to make sure it happens, i.e. we aim to ensure.
It's my firm thought that that's just a matter of someone using the incorrect word. But I think it's worthwhile kind of getting the approval in the town meeting just to make sure that we don't get into a grammatical fight. So I would ask for a motion to put in a warrant that in Article 5, Section 1, the word insure be changed to ensure.
So moved.
Seconded?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Terrific.
I have a question.
Sure.
With the track changes you have approved, do I create this version, except for this particular insure issue, and send it to Charlie so he can document it as a newly dated version?
Yes.
Or do we wait till after the annual meeting and do it just once?
Well, Charlie will be able to tell us if the formatting changes constitute a new version. So I will forward that to him accordingly and ask that question and CC Mark on that.
That's a great idea. And Carol, you're right in that, we're going to be making additional changes to this, but we should just be making it clear to Charlie that when you make the substantive changes, make sure you're making it on the formatically correct version, which we've just decided is the one we've just approved. That makes sense, Lisa? Sense?
I understand.
Great. Okay. So the complicated one here is the issue of the date for filing of annual reports. In my meeting minutes, I pointed out that there were 3 different sections, if you will, dealing with annual reports. In fact, I found a 4th one. And they all seem to have differing dates. The new one I found, just for reference, is Article 7, Section 4. Which talks about the treasurer's duties. And refers to the annual report of the district. So Mark and Rick, this is where we need your input. The annual report of the district, it's capitalized. It is not, as far as I can tell, I could have missed it, defined anywhere here. Is this is something different from the fire district and the water district's annual reports, I take it?
I think the annual report is the compilation of all the committees, doings over the past year. So it comes out at the time of the district meeting in May, typically. I know we just went over a draft of that. So ours, I think, is pretty much done.
So can I explain? Charlie typically asks for all the departments, including the treasurer and the water and the fire department, to submit whatever their reports are. And I produce this pay report and benefits and average hours worked. You're right. It does say that we should make this available 90 days after the close of the fiscal year. Charlie doesn't gives us a deadline of sometime in March or February. So that's when we make sure they're submitted by. But you're right. We don't do this because Charlie doesn't ask for it until February of that year.
Our discussion. Go ahead, Rick.
Lisa, do I understand correctly that the treasurer also submits the finance department report that lists expenditures and income and such later as well? This is just, let me tell you why I'm asking. My understanding is that sometimes till we get well into December, the previous year's books aren't closed yet because we're waiting on all the last minute invoicing and
We're waiting for the auditors to approve. Yeah. And to make sure we've done closing entries that correct things. As per this particular section, the treasurer's office does submit for publication all of this information. The other information, I'd have to look. I think Ray submits it at about the same time, but I'm unsure.
I'm just familiar with a couple of years when I know we had outstanding invoices and insurance payments and things dribbling in well through November.
Okay, so that's a
and he
question about
couldn't finish the book.
encumbrance. Right, these are encumbrances. And so those have been added to the next fiscal year's budget. So if you have promised to pay someone right now for something incurred in fiscal year 22, but it hasn't actually been paid by the end of fiscal year 22, it goes into an encumbrance, meaning it actually gets paid in fiscal year 23. So we carry it over and it doesn't end up appearing as an expenditure in fiscal year 22. It is an expenditure in the next fiscal year attributed to promises that we made in the previous fiscal year. Does that help?
Yeah, that clarifies it for me. If I'm understanding correctly, then this section 4 is not particularly problematic because the salaries, overtime, bonuses, etc., that is available and compilable to meet the deadline as described by the end of September of the following fiscal year. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're never asked for it until later, but we could certainly make it available within those 90 days if asked for it.
Okay.
Mark,
Yeah.
Mark, it's Amy. I was wondering if, I like the part that the treasurer in this, Article 7, the treasurer shall make available the detail of this information upon request. I wasn't sure that we needed within 90 days of the close of the fiscal year, because it could be information upon request and it shall subsequently be published in the annual report. So is it the 90 days that we're addressing? Is that the issue here?
It was, although based on Lisa's comments and Rick's comments, it looks like it may be a non-issue because this is, and actually one of the other articles we talked about may not be an issue too, because based on what they're saying is that this is information which will be included in the annual report, but which is also typically available within 90 days from the close of the fiscal year.
That's
So-
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay. So I think then that we can leave this exactly the way it is, and possibly one of the other sections cited too. Let me take a quick look at that. Let's take a quick look at Article 6, Section 3. So Lisa and Rick, would this be the same situation where this information is essentially the same information is typically available within 90 days so that we can let this lie?
It's the same report. I create all of the departments. Yes, I create all of that at the same time. I do see something I missed, and we should capitalize annual report in that section. I did not see that.
Let's see, where, in what
So
section?
in section 3 there, you see two different, sorry, I'm such a detailed person, but you see annual report, the last line of section 3 is appropriately capitalized, but it is not appropriately capitalized on line 1 of that section. Would you be okay with me changing that one as well?
Yeah, I think if we're gonna do that, it should be the same language too, annual report of the district. My only hesitation, and please jump in here, folks, is I haven't found anywhere here where capital A, capital R, capital D, annual report of the district is defined. That's usually, when something is capitalized like that, that usually means it's it's a particular thing rather than that is, it has some particular form, or I don't know that I want to get into the, defining what the annual report of the district is or should be. That seems like it's been going along merrily for a long, long time. Yeah.
The annual report is capitalized.
Okay. But not defined. Is everyone okay with making this capital A annual, capital R report of the district, capital D, in that first line?
Yeah, I think it should be consistent throughout. I think that
Yes.
the annual report is the compilation of all of the reports from the various committees compiled in a central location, and maybe that's the definition of it. What I said last time, Mark, was that as opposed to doing grammatical things, I think what we ought to be worried about and concerned about is just making sure that the bylaws reflect the culture as it's developed, the working procedures of the district, so that we're doing things the way that we say we are doing them, as opposed to just doing them how we want and ignoring the bylaws. I mean, to me, bylaws are things typically I ignore because the group has a culture, it functions well, it's moving on. The only time we refer back to the bylaws is when something goes awry. So if we are required to produce an annual report, it must be tied to either the charter of the district or some state law. Maybe you just cite that somewhere in a definition section up front, but
Well,
and
Mark,
then I would just capitalize it throughout.
so first of all, I completely agree. We're just, that's the goal here, and we're going to get to that shortly. We're trying to clear out the underbrush as we get there. Should we make this annual report of the district in the first line?
So moved.
Mhm.
Seconded?
Amy,
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Now we
I
get to the part that we talked about last time and that Mark just mentioned, which is that, let's see, it's Article 6, Section 2.
What section, Mark, did you say? Article 6,
Section 2.
Section 2, okay.
So you want me to change, based on what you just voted to approve, you want me to change anything that says annual report to annual report of the district
No, just that one. If we're gonna change any
down
more,
here? Oh.
but just, hang on. Lisa, let's just do it one by one. So the article, then we also, let's see. We decided that Article 6, Section 3 was not an issue. So what we're really just talking about it now is, well, Article 6, Section 2, and making it consistent with current practice. And last time, I think Rick had suggested that instead of by end of the calendar year, this language be changed to by February 28th of the, I guess it would be of the following year. Rick, are you still okay with that? Mark, are you okay with that? And Lisa, do you know of any reason why that wouldn't work?
It's fine for me.
I didn't think about it. We picked February 28th, but realistically, as Mark, you just said, you guys are just getting your final submission together. I just got my final submission in March for the fire department. So I'm wondering if even February 28th is kind of a squeeze for the two departments.
And I would suggest asking Charlie when he can possibly pull together the annual report to be published.
How much lead time does he need?
Yeah, there might be a reason why he has a deadline sometime in March. I don't know exactly when that is. Also, back to Mark's, I'm not a committee member, so I'm sorry for interjecting, but back to Mark's issue about complying with what we do, Section 3, the clerk and all departments have in no way compiled reports within 90 days of the close of the fiscal year.
Are you referring to 6.3?
6.3. So that's asking basically the treasurer's office to make sure we have created this report within 90 days. So I guess the treasurer's office could do that within 90 days rather than in March.
If I had understood you correctly earlier, Lisa, I thought you said that this particular request in Section 3 is specified just for salaries, overtime, bonuses, etc.
We have all that information. Yeah, we do. But we also have within 90 days all kinds of other deadlines like grant writing and that kind of thing. So it could be that that's why it is pushed there. I don't know. I'm not a committee member, so you're the voting committee. I don't know. It is possible.
So Lisa, this is Carol. I'm confused because of the last article and section, I forget that we just did, you said that this was easily produced within 90 days. And now you're saying it's not? Because we assumed it was the same thing as what before the additional one that Mark brought to our attention tonight, Mark Lynch, and they're basically the same thing. It's just now it's listed under the clerk's responsibility versus under the treasury responsibility.
Well, it is the clerk's responsibility, but the clerk asks each one of us, including the treasurer's office, to produce reports, and the treasurer's office produces this report.
Right, but this is the same report that you just said was easily produced in 90 days. And then subsequently, it gets published in the annual district report. It's almost the exact same wording as the previous section. If Mark Lynch, if you can remember what article and section that was.
Yeah, that was Article 7.
It was Article 7, Section 4. It says almost the exact same thing. Instead of it says the treasurer instead of the clerk. So it says the treasurer shall submit to the clerk. And now we're looking at the section that says, okay, the clerk shall have it as well. So it's just the same thing. So I'm confused as to why it works in that section, but not in this section.
The treasurer can produce this report. The treasurer doesn't produce it until the clerk asks for it. So you're right. There's a little parallel issue, but the bottom line is that information could be produced within 90 days. It currently isn't because we never are asked for it, but it could, I guess.
All right, then I think we can probably leave that yeah, it looks like it's the same as Article 7, Section 4, which really then, once we've made that distinction, we're
Section
just
3.
back.
Oh, Section 4, sorry. So it's Article 6, Section 3 and Article 7, Section 4 almost say the exact same thing, and we're good with that.
Correct.
Yes.
What about the dates for Article 6, Section 2 that Rick mentioned, February 28th? Do we think that we should change it to February 28th rather than by the end of the calendar year in Section 2?
No, I think if we do anything, it should be out to March 30th.
Yeah, I
But-
was going to suggest that. Yep. Thank you, Carol. That
But-
was what I was thinking.
But someone was saying to ask Charlie. I think the committee chairs or the committee representatives here, Rick and Mark, would March 30th make sense?
It would be an easier lift for the fire department, but to have the March 30th deadline.
But the clerk doesn't ask for these things to be actually printed until May.
Right, that's what I was gonna say.
So it hasn't.
But there's a lot of review that goes on in Prudential during April, I believe, so that it has to go out, I believe, it be published and mailed out to the district voters 2 weeks before the meeting in May.
The annual report is not snail mailed. It is only made of, I don't believe
Okay,
it's
made
snail-
available, but it has all the warrants in it, et cetera. So I do believe
it
it
has-
gets published.
Actually, it has the warrant from the previous fiscal year, not the upcoming one. The annual
There's a
report is
separate package of the current warrants that is given out at the same time
Yeah.
as the
Right.
prior fiscal year's report.
Well,
I think it might be instructive for those of us who like to think visually. Somebody could make a calendar and just show when is the end of the fiscal year. It's, as far as I know, it's June 30th.
all right.
June 30th, yeah.
So 90 days after June 30th is the end of September. We really don't need to the end of the March to come up with the report of the prior fiscal year that ended 9 months prior to that. It shouldn't take that long. I mean, a lot of it is regurgitated. You know, the water department does pretty much the same thing every year. We put different numbers in there. We have occasionally we pass a new regulation or something, but it's not that complicated. The
one of
narrative
the-
report.
it's-
So, you know, I think if we had just this, you know, timeline and just show people here, this is a date by which everybody should have things in, and then it shouldn't be coming down to crunch time, March to May, to have everything assembled. It's just because we let everything drift here, but
Can
there's no
I
reason-
point out that the audit is never finished by September? And the
Okay.
audit needs to go into the annual report.
okay. But
And
the
the final
reports of the
results.
committees, there's no reason the reports of the committees need to wait that long. They're not that complicated.
Right. You're right, Mark, and it might be helpful to have that separated from budget time in the spring to have this done. Because it's pretty much done before the annual meeting. It's just getting it together. But it's a published thing that, shall be caused to publish all annual reports. So that's something that, would you want to have it published twice? It's going to be amended
doesn't have
after
to
the
be-
audit.
It doesn't have to be published. It should be filed with the clerk within 90 days.
The clerk shall cause to be published all annual reports.
Right, in May before the next meeting, if that's when we have to wait until for the audit. But the actual narrative doings of the committees, there's no reason that has to wait so long. Other than we don't want to do it during the summer because we like our summer.
When would you think those should be due, Mark?
October 1st.
So,
I mean, right now we're crunched up. We're doing our budget. We're doing the narrative doings, our report. It all comes like to a head right now in February and March. And it'd be nice to just get one thing out of the way, I would think, and be forced to do that.
That's what I was saying, that it would be nice to separate it out since it was completed in the May meeting and the fiscal year ends June 30th, get that done. So
I mean, we know how many water connections we've done in the prior fiscal year by the day after the end of the fiscal year. It's not.
so Article 11, Section 7 says that all narrative annual reports of officers and committee of the district will be filed with the district clerk within 45 days of the close of the fiscal year. So are we making...
That's what we're ignoring.
Okay, but I just thought you suggested that the narrative reports.
It could be done in 45 days. It's just that it happens to be during the summertime when,
Okay,
that's the one time in Katuitt where we like to do something else, but the committee reports.
and good for us, says I. So
So I think we should give ourselves a break for the summer, but there's no reason it can't be ready by October 1st.
I think we can all get consensus on that. So, which leaves me, the new guy scratching his head a little bit though. What's the difference between a narrative annual report, not capitalized, and an annual report, which we're talking about,
So this is the distinction. The annual report, the capital A and capital R, is the printed material that's distributed by hand before the district meeting in the spring. The narrative and reports of this letter from the committee to the district of what we've been doing for the past fiscal year.
And so I have the annual report of the whole district, and inside I have the water department's report of the Board of Water Commissioners. So, so the water commissioners have produced a report. It's not called an annual report. That's the distinction. So that is the confusion.
this is all narrative annual reports.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to put it. So all narrative annual reports.
So what do
So
we
is
call
that-
the thing that would be, assuming that we adopt this, what do we call the thing that gets filed October 1st? And what do we call by the water and fire district? And what do we call the thing that gets filed by February 28th or March 30th, whatever we decide on? What are those two different things?
Capital letters are the published report. And that doesn't have to be produced its final version until roughly the end of April.
And say that again, Rick, that's the final.
The capital letter annual report of the district is the printed, as Mark Robinson said earlier, it's the printed compilation of the narrative reports of the three boards, plus the treasurer's report, plus whatever else the clerk sticks in there.
Votes,
The narrative
just-
reports of the boards get submitted to the clerk, and he uses them to compile a document called the annual report of the district.
Okay.
I would just throw in here that Mark must give up on summer a little earlier than I do. October 1st actually hits a crowded time for us often, at least every third year, because we're beginning contract negotiations again. And so we have our hands full, but I certainly think if we knew in advance to expect it, we could have this done by, mid-November or mid-December, and have the narrative reports in, because as I recall, I think about what we had to pull together, and particularly now that much of our data is much more computerized than it used to be. It was a lot easier to grab the various bits and pieces and put it together. But I would suggest maybe a later in the fall date.
Yeah, that's fine.
So-
Let's get the brass tacks though. What's the date? November 15th? November 1st?
Fine.
November 15th? You okay
Yeah.
with that?
Yes.
Okay, so this
Well,
would, we would change Article 11, Section 7 to read, all narrative annual reports of officers and committees of the district will be filed with the district clerk by November 15th after the close of the fiscal year.
hold on, let me get there. All right.
Don't incorporate this, Lisa. This would require a vote. And then, of course, this gets recommended to the Prudential Committee. And they need to weigh in on it as well. But would everyone be okay with that language? And if so, can I get a motion? I'll say it.
I'm lost.
All narrative annual reports of officers and committees of the district will be filed with the district clerk by November 15th after the close of the fiscal year.
So that, look at Article 6, Section 2. So it sounds like you're moving up his original by the end. Isn't this section saying the clerk shall? Oh, no, that's different. I'm sorry. I will leave it all to you.
Okay, are we okay with that language? And if so, can I get a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that.
Before I offer a second, could I point out 6.2 says cause to be published. And that's simply that he has it submitted. This is under the clerk, so it would fall to Charlie then to be required to have this published. Right now, as it stands, he's supposed to have it published by the end of the calendar year.
Yeah.
And in fact, never
that
does.
sentence is totally inoperative. It makes no sense to
Yes.
anybody.
That's what we're looking to change.
Right.
So I think it should say that the clerk shall be responsible to publish an annual report of the district. And pick a time prior to the next district meeting in May. And then we can work backwards from that. So the committees will get them a letter narrative of what they've been doing in the previous fiscal year. He'll compile his numbers, we'll get the audit done, and so that everything will be ready for May, but this sentence just doesn't make any sense. So I would just strike.
Well, I think this is Carol. One of the problems I think is we're referring to the officers and committees letters to the annual district report. We're referring to it here as an annual report.
Right.
So maybe we say the annual committee letters instead of annual report to be be submitted to the clerk by November 15th, however you want to wordsmith it. But that's what I think. We're using annual report to say two different things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. But I think that this is the section where it should say that the clerk is responsible for the annual report with a capital A. And it should be available to the district voters before the next district meeting. And then we work backwards and say the committees will have their letters ready by November 15th. All the fiscal information shall be available by May 31st, May 30th, I mean, March 30th. Whatever makes sense for each board, but let's define the annual report right here in section 2. That's where it should go. So an annual report is comprised of the votes of the previous district meeting, the letters from the committees, the treasurer's report, the clerk's report. Just define what's in it. I mean, just go to the table of contents and put it right there.
This is Amy, I thought section 2 was talking about the officers and committees annual report, not the annual report of the district, just the
It is.
committee's annual report.
It is, but I'm saying that we should just strike that whole thing and start over and do what we do.
Okay, Mark.
Makes
Yeah.
no sense.
Because it doesn't make sense to use the terms annual report for two different things.
Unless,
Your suggestion, Mark, is great. I just looked at the district's annual report, and it has no table of contents. So,
Well, we can summarize what's in it. We know what's in it. It's always the same stuff. So let's just summarize it. Summarize the headings. That's all.
okay.
And then everybody will know, whoa, the annual report is supposed to have these things in it. Some things are due to the clerk at certain times and some are due other times, but it is the most important document each year of the district. So we ought to define it and say what's in it. I mean, it's developed by culture. Let's define the culture now. Now's the time to do it. Unfortunately, I have to leave in 2 minutes, so I'm sorry to you.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that, Mark. I actually think maybe a good idea, although it's a little, well, it's a little aggressive here, but yeah, I don't know what the difference is between, that's why I'm struggling, between a narrative annual report and an annual report.
You'll notice it if you read the district report. You'll see what he's talking about. It's just like a letter composed by the
Right.
committees.
Yeah.
It's a
Right.
letter, but they're calling it an annual report. It should be an annual letter or
Right.
committee reporting or something.
exactly. So
That-
committee annual report rather than district annual report.
But I wouldn't use annual report. I would define it differently. I
Annual
would say
summary.
annual, yeah, or letter or whatever you want.
Yeah.
Committee report, annual committee report. How about that?
Mark, Rick, does that make sense? Annual committee report?
It's fine.
I'm flipping through a copy of the report from fiscal 18. And the first major heading is simply report of the clerk. And he reports everything from the prior year's annual district meeting. Then came report of the Board of Fire Commissioners. And we did all our stuff. And then comes report of the Board of Water Commissioners. And they report their things. And then there is a Prudential Committee report and a report of the treasurer. And that's the substance of it. The first page includes, in this case, was the dedication in memory of Brian Hoover. So there's also the clerk often at the very beginning has some narrative just highlighting if there were any major events that would fall beyond the scope of the normal report of the boards. But that's to the clerk's discretion.
So you could say report of the boards, report of the
Right, report of
boards.
the boards would cover it, and report of the clerk, report of the boards, report of the treasurer. And that's every year been the substance of what's there.
So all I'm saying is that section 2 here should just define what is the annual report of the district. You've just read it off. So 2 sentences will
perfect.
handle
I
it.
absolutely agree with you, Mark. I think that's a great idea to use this slot to codify that. And all those cumulative reports constitutes the annual report of the district.
Right.
And that the timeline for that is it must be available X weeks prior to the subsequent annual district meeting.
Right. I'm so sorry. I do have to leave. I apologize for leaving you in lurch like this, but looks like you're making some good progress.
Take care, Mark.
We also have your input from before, so that's great.
Thanks, Mark.
I think that the only other, I like the committee reports or the board reports. I think that sounds great what Rick just said, but if we're going to add in what Mark Robinson also said was to have a fall deadline for those committee reports.
Well, we're calling them now board reports of the board.
Board reports. So have a fall deadline of those board reports. So it's one less thing that the boards have to do in the spring. Is that what Mark was saying? And I think Rick was saying, yeah, as long as you don't do it October 1st.
Right.
So if it's
That's right, Carol.
Pardon?
I said, that's right, because by December, January, and well into February, we're hustling trying to get our next year's budget together.
Exactly.
And working on the capital plan and the next fiscal year. And so the report, when it gets put off till there, again, by culture. And so if we set something like a November 15th timeline for the reports of the boards to be submitted to the clerk, and that the clerk is charged to make this compilation and produce an annual report of the district, which itself has to be available X time before the subsequent annual district meeting.
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
So if I can summarize, and I may not be able to, jump in if I step astray. Article 11, Section 7 refers to all narrative annual reports of officers and committees. We would change that language to all reports of the boards, basically, will be filed with the district court by November 15th after the close
Yes.
of the year.
Exactly.
Okay, and then
Oh, hold on. The Prudential Committee is not a board, it's a committee. That's
Okay.
probably why it says officers and committees.
So we would then change it, make it to all narrative annual reports of. Well, all right, let's focus on the exact language, but the thrust of
Well,
it
I
is
think
that-
you could, instead of calling it a board report, call it the committee report. So reports of officers and committees, because it is the Board of Commissioners, it's the Board of Water, are you guys committees or boards? Rick?
Boards.
Okay, so then we would say annual reports of officers, boards, and committees.
Because the officers would include the clerk, the treasurer. The boards include fire and water. And committee is prudential, and if there are any exceptional reports of subcommittees that would want to be included, that would be covered.
Okay, so we'll work on the exact wordsmithing, but it'll be something like all. Okay, and then this is, we were trying to get a distinction between a narrative annual report and whatever we're calling the annual report of the district. Basically, something is going to get filed, and this is where we need to make it clear because it's not now. Something's going to get filed November 15th, and something's going to get filed, whatever it is, March 30th, February 28th. What's the one, and what's the thing that we call that gets filed October 15th?
So what we were saying that one would be was all officers, boards, and committee reports of the or all officers, boards, and committee reports of the district will be filed with the district clerk by
By-
November 15th of the close of the fiscal year.
Okay.
And does
So you're
that,
taking out narrative annual and putting the officers, board, and committees before that. So all officers, board, and committee reports or committee reports of the district will be filed with the district clerk within 45 days of the close of the fiscal year.
So I'm okay
Not
with
the
that.
45 days, November 15th.
I'm sorry, November 15th. Yep, sorry.
Yeah, not 45 days. We're cutting that.
Right. So then what gets filed March 30th?
remember, the audit hasn't been completed by November. So raise can't be done until March.
Well, that's fine. I literally, all I want to know is what gets filed March 30th? What do we call it? I'm not saying it should or it should be filed, then what is it?
It's nothing. We've superseded it. We've brought it back into the fall and taken it off of our desks in the winter.
Oh. Okay.
And that's fine for fire and water. And it probably works for the clerk as well. The person blowing in the wind here is the treasurer, who can't possibly complete their end of it by this.
I'm a
So
little
maybe there's an
Everybody else could get it done by mid-November, and the clerk would have plenty of time to put things together and
Right. So that might also be nice for the clerk, because then he or she could just focus on getting the warrants out. Because our annual report of the district will have been completed before the end of the year or whenever the audit is done. So maybe there's a section there that needs to say annual reports of office, boards, and committees, blah, 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 by the November 15th, except for treasurer's report, which will get added after audit is complete. I don't know, however you would want to say it.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, because this report that Charlie is putting together, Mark, is something it's past. It's what happened at the district meeting in May, and then what's happened at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
And
I was just
then then the other things he needs to produce in the spring are the new warrant and budget proposals for the district meeting. So this separates the 2 years, which would be really nice to have that done, I think. But Rick, what do you think?
I agree, Carol. One of the things that's frustrating to me is that by the time you get the annual report, you're already wrapping up the next fiscal year. So you're
Right.
always looking a minimum of 11 months back. So if this was actually, if the annual report was available shortly after the treasurer can close the books and get the green light from the auditors, and the clerk would have everything else ready to go, so the treasurer's report could get dumped into that and printed, this thing might be able to get out by the end of January, and people would actually have a somewhat more contemporaneous opportunity to review what happened in the preceding fiscal year.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. And I guess, it sounds like the the boards can pull it off and the clerk can pull it off. The question is, when does Treasury pull it off? And Lisa, you're saying the audit is a movable time range, but is it usually done by January? I mean, what would be a reasonable date to put it in there, or some wordsmiths to put in there for you?
Ray would be able to answer that better. It's getting done faster and faster, but
Okay.
there are sometimes glitches, such as during the COVID thing. And during that time, we had an auditor who disbanded or lost staff or something like that, and all kinds of delays occurred.
Right,
You would best ask Ray about
okay,
what.
but regardless, it's clearly not being done within 45 days of the close of the fiscal year currently. So all we're trying to do is make it a little more realistic without worrying about it being a definitive, except for the committees, which want to get it done so that they can move on. And I'm
So I
sure
would-
that the clerk would appreciate having his or her workload spread out over the year versus everything just in the spring.
I would say your best bet is to ask Ray about what's reasonable there.
Okay,
So, help me a little
I'm
here.
happy to do that, Mark, if you want me to. I'm happy to have that conversation with Ray.
Well, yeah, look, I'm still a little confused. I thought this whole thing started with, whole discussion started with Article 6, Section 2. Which
Yes,
requires the clerk
it
to
did.
publish all annual reports of all officers and committees of the districts by the end of the calendar year. And we concluded that we needed more time. It should be pushed out to March 30. Setting aside that this relates to the clerk, the information is not getting to the clerk until March 30. Just to be clear, now we're contemplating, instead of extending it, we're contemplating of moving up that deadline. That is to get stuff to the clerk relating to the annual reports to November 15th.
Correct. Because during this discussion, it was Mark Robinson and Rick both realized that, hey, if we could get this done earlier, that'd be great. And to have it actually put in the bylaws, so we have to do it by the 15th versus just the end of the year, that it might be a good change in procedure.
If the two districts, or I'm sorry, the two fire and water are okay with doing that, I'm certainly okay with doing that.
But I would change that word narrative annual reports to whatever we said, which was be published all officers, boards and committee reports.
But remember, this 6.2 is what Mark had suggested got overhauled to describe the publishing of the annual report of the district.
Correct.
And for it to
Correct.
be available prior to the next year's annual district meeting.
Right.
And then we went back down to 11, I think it was 11.7, to
Right.
speak to when material would get to the clerk.
Right.
And within
Yeah, I mean,
that-
there's,
And what did we decide about that?
Right. So we're really, this is Amy, we're really changing the language in Article 6, Section 2, Article 7, Section 4, and Article 11, Section 7, all around the date for these reports.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, all three are affected by, or need to be brought up to speed by what we just did in Article 11, Section 7.
I think that's right. So let's read those off again, Amy, if you would.
It's Article 6, Section 2. Article 7, Section 4. Actually, Article 7 refers
No.
only to the treasurer.
Okay.
So
Yeah, no,
forget
Article,
that.
no, it's only the two. It's only this,
Yeah,
Article
you're right.
6 and Article 11.
That's right. So Article 7, Section 4 really only refers to the treasurer. So I was wrong. Sorry, guys.
Okay. All right, and we're thinking about, in addition to changing that date, we're going to define what the annual report of the district is.
Mhm.
And we are going to, the fire and water say that they can get their annual report materials, so to speak, in by November 15th. I'm going to check with Ray and Carol. I'd be happy to have you join me if you'd like, to see if the
Nope.
treasurer can get in their materials by that date.
They won't be able to get it in by that date. We're asking Ray what date would be comfortable. But in reality, they haven't been getting it within 45 days. So maybe we just make that consistent, knowing that treasurer report is going to be later.
You don't have to specify a date for the treasurer. If we're going to frame that for everybody else, we can have a different definition that the treasurer shall provide his report at the completion of the audit.
Right. That's great. And we can see if Ray is okay with that. And I'm sure Prudential can get their letter, their report done as well as water and fire boards do.
Right,
It's
because
just that they
theirs
can't be
usually
called
isn't
a
much
board.
more
They're-
than the, streetlights and Freedom Hall.
Exactly. And it's just Lisa's point was that they're not a board, so we would have to refer to them as a committee, but I'm sure they can get that done. And it actually, I think, is going to help you guys because you're going to be writing that letter right after the meeting instead of a year later or 10 months later, when your
When
heads
I
are
was
already in
originally
it.
lobbying for putting it out into the end of March, I had really forgotten that since Paul had been chief and computerized so much of the operational data and got these new computerized platforms for monthly and quarterly compiling, the hard part had previously been going back through and trying to construct the numbers part of our annual narrative. But now that is much easier, so we can get on it much more quickly.
And it
So
also
that's why-
makes it, yeah, it also seems to make sense, Rick, to me, that you want to get the closed fiscal year reporting done before you start mixing it with the new budget numbers. So then you're not having to go back and forth between two different fiscal years. Let's just complete the year, and then you guys are fresh to start in January, February, March on the next budget.
Well, let me do this. I will volunteer to try to revise Article 6, Section 2, Article 11, Section 7, to comply with this general sense. I will talk to Ray to see if that language would work for him, basically giving him an exception until the auditors have completed their report. I'll propose some language about that. Is there anyone who would like to take the task of trying to define what's in the annual report?
I can write out the description that I gave you earlier. I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be great, Rick. Anything else on this issue? We've changed where we're. I think it's a good change.
I do too.
Mark, this is Amy. I would like to go back to, if we're done with some of these other sections, to Article 1, Section 1, where we define the officers. There was a suggestion that, about the assistant treasurer, and I don't think there's any mechanism where we put into the bylaws a new officer. I think there's another mechanism to appoint an additional officer, and that the officers of the district include a treasurer, but there's no mechanism for us to just add an assistant treasurer. There's another way to do this, and I would probably have to refer to the mass, another document, Mass General Laws, Department of Revenue, something. There's some other definition of how this works, but off the top of my head, I don't know this minute, but I used to know because we had talked about it in the past, years and years and years and years ago when I served.
Okay.
I have recently answered this question. I'm a regular employee. I am not an elected or appointed official.
That's correct.
So while I have seen the assistant treasurer included in long ago annual reports as in the category of officers or elected or appointed officers, that was when there wasn't a treasurer.
That's correct. Lisa, I think you're right. That's Amy again.
I think there should be and is a separation of responsibilities from officers who make high-level decisions and those of us who push through the mechanics of a lot of the operations. and that makes sense. That's a separation of duties. I think there's a reason why the assistant treasurer isn't included in this.
Yeah, I agree, Lisa. I saw the note and I wanted to make sure I brought that up tonight. Thanks, Lisa. That was a great explanation.
But thanks for the vote of confidence.
Seconded, Lisa. For sure.
I had raised this question because I was confused in Section 2, Article 1, Section 2, where all officers of the district shall serve for 3 years or until their successors are chosen and qualified. And that would mean that applies to the treasurer.
Okay.
The treasurer's inclusion in this seems like a hybrid. He's neither fish nor fowl. He's referred to as an officer, but he's hired, he's not appointed. And he doesn't have I don't think he has a 3-year term, does he?
No.
No, that's a good point. So maybe instead of adding the assistant treasurer, we take out the treasurer altogether from Section 1.
Except that the treasurer gets to make a bunch of pretty high-end
Right,
decisions when it comes to dealing with bonding agencies and things like
Right.
that.
And
I don't think we do that, Carol. I don't think we delete the treasurer.
Ray
How
might
about
be
you say,
interested in
and maybe you add the word and appointed treasurer, because it's Section 3, it says the clerk and the treasurer shall be appointed, which is, that's right, the clerk is appointed, it's the moderator that's voted in. So maybe you say, and an appointed treasurer, so it defines it in Section 1 as not being an elected.
Right. Yeah. Because the treasurer serves until a new treasurer is appointed.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that up because I saw that in the notes that I got from all of you.
Thank you, Amy. It's a good point. And Rick, your comment about the treasurer not being an officer is dead on too. And I don't know that if the fix is putting and an appointed treasurer, if the sentence refers to the officers of the Katuitt Fire District. But Carol, I get what you're getting at. There should be a way.
Right. Well, if you don't want to remove it, then that's a way of like making it a cousin once removed.
So then we
It's
would add,
interesting that it's up there. If the treasurer is not an officer, regardless of what the decisions they're making, or the bonding and stuff like that.
right,
I don't think the treasurer does that without the Prudential Committee voting on it. So
Well,
it's an interesting question.
it is, and I've always thought of the treasurer as an officer. So this is an interesting discussion we're having.
In looking at section 1, if you read down through the last line, starting on the line above, a 3-member board of fire commissioners, comma, and an appointed clerk and an appointed treasurer.
Yeah, I like that, Rick. I like that.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a good clarification.
Well,
It's
it matches
specified in
with
section 3 that both are appointed.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's by the way, Amy, that's the reference to Mass General Laws about the appointing of those positions, section 3.
right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a good clarification, Rick.
Okay, and then in section 2, we'll just have to say all officers of the district, with the exception of the clerk and the treasurer, shall serve
Yes,
3 years.
Can we simplify it to just say all elected officers?
Much better.
Because in section 1, we've already defined the clerk and the treasurer as appointed.
There we
So in
go.
section 2, all we have to do is say all elected officers.
yeah, very good, very good.
Oh, okay, the officers, let me just reread it one more time.
You want someone to read the whole line, Mark?
No, I'm just rereading it, and then it'll say all elected, this section 2, all elected officers of the district consist of.
With the exception of the clerk and treasurer, shall serve for 3 years or until their successors are chosen and qualified.
Yeah.
You don't have to say the exception. You just say all elected officers is what Rick was saying.
That's right. That's right.
Just the word, add the word elected.
Yep, I did. I did add elected.
Yeah. Okay, let me work on that one too.
Well, Lisa just typed it in on the screen and it looks good the way she wrote it, both of them. She added the word elected and put in and the appointed clerk and treasurer.
I have turned over the track change document to Mark to take on the rest of this. So I'm just doing this just to illustrate for you what you're saying, but I haven't.
Yep, got it.
Made all those changes, but I have to say, you guys are studying a lot of things really well, and I'm grateful that you're taking on the clarity, and I'm also glad that you now have the document to work with as you would like.
Lisa, it's Amy. What about and an appointed clerk and treasurer instead of the? How does that sound to you? Board of Fire Commissioners and an appointed clerk and treasurer. What do you think?
I think the allows it to look plural.
You think they, okay, I'll go with it. If you think it's good.
Lisa, one thing, earlier on, we voted to accept all of the changes in your track changes. So if you're going to send me a document that I can do track changes and you need to keep the one we voted on separate, because that's
That's the one you have.
okay, but you've got a separate copy of it, because if I make changes to it, we've already accepted everything in your
Right.
original track changes version. So
Okay,
just hold on to that.
Okay, I did not accept the changes. I sent it to you and you have the power to accept the changes. Would you like me to accept all of those changes in the file I sent you, except for the ensure? And then I will send that to you and you can start your track changes in the next round.
So you will have separate, just a version of the track changes documents that we voted on and accepted those changes.
I
Because-
Which we're
will,
spelling in typographic, right?
Typo.
Yeah,
Yes.
You'll keep a separate copy of that, Lisa.
right.
I've sent that to you. You're asked. You
And
have
I-
authorized,
You sent that to me and I'm gonna change it.
But Mark, you
Yeah,
have it
you
in an
sent it to
email,
all
you
of
can
us.
just save that file.
no, Mark sent you the PDF. I sent to Mark the PDF as well as the track
Wow.
change Word document. But let me see
Okay.
if I can dig out what I sent you, accept all changes except ensure. And then you will start with a clean slate. Okay?
Perfect.
Okay.
Because what the changes I'm gonna make are all gonna be proposed changes that people are gonna have other changes to, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera.
And the
Okay.
changes we just made are going to go before the district.
Yeah, I don't think we've made any, well, we've made
No.
some conceptual changes and I will have to parse out some language for you guys to look at on for
Okay.
example, the annual report, et cetera. I'm afraid we're gonna need another one of these meetings. Although,
Woohoo!
yeah, exactly. I totally agree that you guys are finding a lot of really good stuff here.
Yeah, I think so too. A request, Mark, if there's another meeting, is there any chance it could occur in, say, the next 2 to 3 weeks?
As far as I'm concerned, it could.
Okay, because I leave the last week of April to be out of town as well.
Okay.
I don't know that we want to wait till the second week of May.
Okay, you're right. I'm leaving to be away for a month on Friday, but I can do this remotely.
Oh, okay.
So, okay, should we, wow, we've given ourselves a lot of work. Should we try one more issue? I think it may be one we can, well, Lisa wondered about the annual meeting start time of 7:30 PM and whether that time kind of diminished attendance. Lisa, I assume you meant that it's a little late.
It could possibly impact attendance. I believe the Prudential Committee is thinking about figuring out what questions it wants to ask. And so after those questions are formed, maybe that's the time to address that. You know, does the district want to encourage a younger group of people? Then you do a survey to determine if young parents would be more inclined to come earlier, you know, down the line. I just asked the question because
Right,
7:30 is a real late time for
I do too.
a lot of people.
Okay. Let's hold that for now, but it isn't, I think it's an interesting point. I don't know the answer. Okay, let's hold that for the time being. Let me look at you know what, we've given ourselves, I think, we've covered everything that I've got, and we've given ourselves a lot of tasks here. So, Rick, if you'll work on attempted a definition of annual reports, I will try to come up with language as close as possible to what we've been discussing here today. And then I'll send that out in draft before we get to our next meeting.
And
I'll send
if,
around a draft of what would amount to an index.
Okay.
looking forward to any input you need, if you guys
Okay,
happy to help. But
right.
no, Mark, to answer your question, I don't need to be with you when you talk to Ray. I was trying to take something off your to-do list, but I'm fine if you, whatever.
Then let me chat with Ray.
That's
Can I
fine. That's fine.
adjourn?
Okay,
So moved.
Seconded?
seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The meeting ends at 7:21. Thank you all again for your.
Yeah.